All right, Steve. Well, congratulations. Nice book. Kind of what was the whole thought process? Hey, I'm going to do a book. This is your first? No, this is your second one.
My second book, Chris. Yeah, back in January when the Knights were winning and it appeared they were going to carry this right through the season, have a record year, I thought to myself, this is a really good story. It might make a really good book. Well, of course, later on, both newspapers put out their own books, but they were mostly compilations and photos and stuff with some words sprinkled in. I wanted to write the definitive book on the Golden Knights, having covered the entire process from the embryonic stages right through, of course, through the Stanley Cup final and afterwards. So I just thought it would be a timely thing to write, and I thought it could also reach out to 4 different groups. Obviously, Golden Knights fans, hockey fans, sports fans, and people who live in Las Vegas who, of course, were here for the 1 October tragedy. It's covered very extensively in the book, and how the team was so important in helping the city heal.
Oh, yeah. What impressed you probably most about you mentioned the embryonic stages.
Yes.
I mean, you and I both were.
Yeah.
I mean, what impressed you about those early stages?
How unpretentious Bill Foley was for a billionaire.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a jeans and golf shirt kind of guy. He's not a 3-piece suit guy. I mean, I worked for a billionaire at the Review Journal in Sheldon Adelson, and Bill Foley is very, very different. He's just a regular guy that you could sit down and have a glass of wine with. Notice I didn't say have a beer, but you could have a glass of wine with Bill and talk about anything, politics, sports, military history, anything that you want. He's very well versed and well educated.
And it seemed like that season, as you mentioned, it was almost like it was lined with gold. So many things happened to make it work. Late goals, timely goals, obviously the postseason. It almost seemed like it was the perfect storm for Foley and what happened.
I mean, and think about the way they marketed the team off the ice, Chris. And I mean, you remember the night they announced the name and people were saying, eh. You know, you were the one who made the announcement, if you recall.
That's right.
And so people were like, I'm not sure I'm on board with this Golden Knights name thing. But they eventually grew to love it and buy all the gear. And now you can't drive around town anywhere without seeing a hat, a jersey, a T-shirt, a bumper sticker, a flag. I mean, this city and this team have really fallen in love with each other.
And to even think that Golden Knights, as you mentioned, I mean, has become one of the more popular selling items in the entire NHL.
They were, and I thought, you know, the logo was cool, but winning, look, Chris, winning does everything. That solves all issues and problems. Had this team been, you know, the 1975 Washington Capitals and won 8 games, we wouldn't be here sitting talking about Vegas-born, the remarkable story of the Golden Knights. So let's be honest, the winning had everything to do with all the success off the ice as well.
Is there like maybe 2 chapters that you really look at and you go, man, obviously you love the book, you wouldn't put together, but is there 2 like chapters you go, man, I love that and I love that?
I do. I like the first chapter where the Maathuis family and Bill Foley connected thanks to Gary Bettman, because I thought it was fascinating how this merger came about. And I don't think people realize that, you know, Joe and Gavin Maathuis and their brother George, they really were the ones who first wanted to bring an NHL team to Las Vegas after the failed attempt with Jerry Bruckheimer back in 2008 when the recession hit. But the fact that they connected with Bill Foley and it really worked out, I think, is an important thing. And then obviously the chapter dealing with the home opener on October 10th with Derek England's speech and just the lovely ceremony. Remember, the team had to pivot 180 degrees. They were going to have this kind of cool ceremony and have a lot of fun, and they were going to bust out Chance, the mascot, and the Golden Knight mascot, and do all the things we got to grow accustomed to seeing. But it was such a solemn and dignified ceremony tonight. I don't think we'll ever forget it, and it's really well chronicled in that chapter. And of course, the way the Coyotes and then the first responders who were introduced with the players that night. I don't think we'll ever forget that night. And that, to me, is the other resonating point in the book.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about is there a chapter on players and the expansion players?
It is, there is. How the team was built is in the book, and how George McPhee and his staff went through all the processes of the mock drafts. And remember, they did like 4 or 5 of those mock drafts. Misha Donskov's analytics coming into play. Tom Paranska, who they had gotten from General Faniger, to help with all the salary cap numbers and everything. It really was an important process. And naturally, when they didn't get the first overall pick, and they wound up picking 6th in the entry draft, and they took Cody Glass, was also important because, yeah, they traded Suzuki for Pacioretty this summer, but that whole thing of drafting Brandstrom, of drafting Nick Hague, of Glass, and a few of these other guys who may one day be Golden Knights players, it was very important, that whole process that George McPhee, Kelly McCrimmon, and that hockey staff did. I thought that his staff that he put together, those hockey people, Von Karpen and all the scouts, David Conti, it was like putting an all-star team together. And I think if you're looking for a reason why this team was successful, Gallant is a big part of it because the players responded to his coaching, and obviously the players themselves. But George McPhee did an amazing job of putting a great hockey staff together to identify these guys, select them, and then make sure that they were, in the right spots, and gave Gallant and his staff a chance to coach. Obviously, the one miss, Shapashev. They didn't get it right with him, but overall, for the other roster spots, you'd have to give them high marks for what they did.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about those mock drafts. They did a ton of work before they actually went into that.
Yeah, and Chris, it was really important that they knew what they were doing. They were constantly talking to the NHL, to Bill Daley, the deputy commissioner, to make sure that they weren't breaking rules and that they took advantage of the rules as they were written.
Yeah.
Because remember, the league kind of gave them a lot of latitude in terms of what they could select and who they could take, and they took full advantage of it. And now with Seattle imminently on board, it's going to be the same thing for Seattle in a couple of years.
And it's also cool, this is kind of aside from the whole thing, remember how we won't take this guy, we want a draft pick, or it's like they were
The side deals were huge. I mean, that's how they got Riley Smith and a couple of other guys, Tuck. I mean, all these little side deals they made by not taking player A, got them player B plus player C.
Yeah.
And so when you look back on it, that wheeling and dealing that McPhee did really paid off in the end.
Now, in the book, do you have certain games that you highlight?
All 82 regular season.
Oh, yeah.
And every single playoff game, there's mention of everyone. Now,
wow.
Some more than others, obviously.
Yeah, right.
The playoffs, each playoff round has its own special chapter devoted strictly to that round. So the round with the Kings, the round with the Sharks, the round with the Jets, and certainly the Stanley Cup final with Washington, each chapter is unto itself.
Wow.
And everything, and it highlights all the things, Fleury getting hurt, Fleury coming back, Fleury going to Pittsburgh, just to mention one player.
Right.
And of course, all the other times when players would go back to their former cities where they had played before and everything. And it's pretty comprehensive. And it was written that way intentionally because I didn't want to leave anything out. And at the same time, I also wanted to point out some of the things they did off the ice. The drum line, the Golden Aces cheerleaders, Chance, who turned out to be very popular. You talk about, the new Chance is that Flyers mascot, Gritty, who kind of looks like the Philly Fanatics' third cousin,
right.
Twice removed. Well, off the ice, Kerry Bubolz and Brian Killingsworth and Kim Frank and that entire staff did an amazing job of promoting and selling this team, not only in Las Vegas, but well beyond. Like you said, their gear was among the most popular in the NHL last year.
Isn't it amazing, too, how the criticism, the name, the chants, and how it was from being criticized to embraced.
Again,
So
when you
crazy.
win, Chris, it's a lot easier to sell stuff when you're winning than when you're losing.
Yeah.
So
Is there in the book, are there individual, do you highlight the individual players or groups of players, or like your favorite player, or how do you do with the players?
I kind of like gave each player a little bit of introduction, who he was, where he'd come from. You know, let's say, you know, like Colin Miller. You know, I had mentioned that he had played in Boston, you know, when they played the Bruins, and that the Bruins really didn't want to let him go, but they had to let go of somebody. And then when he came back to Boston in November and got to play, you know, in the Garden again, just as an example, and obviously when Nate Schmidt came back to Washington in February, and what it was like for him, how he talked about how Barry Trotz told him to take full advantage of this opportunity, don't squander it, because he wasn't getting that ice time in Washington that he would get with Gallant playing in Vegas. And obviously they did take advantage of it. He led the team in on ice last year. And so yeah, each player throughout the book gets sprinkled in and talked about.
Of the postseason, obviously getting to the final was remarkable, but that LA series that you talk about in the book, that had to be one of the most phenomenal series.
You know, Chris, when you think about it, honestly, they were very fortunate. You know,
Yeah.
the Doughty gets suspended. They were without Muzzin for a game. These games were so close.
Could have gone the other way.
They could have easily been on the, as I wrote, they could have easily been on the wrong side of the handshake line.
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact that they got through, they swept LA, was big because it gave them time to rest and prepare for San Jose, which turned out to be a tough series. I mean, they were in trouble there, you know, losing game 2 after winning game 1 so easily. And then, you know, finding a way to win in San Jose, I thought was a real key. Just like in Winnipeg, they found a way to win up there.
Yeah.
And that was a very hostile environment, as you remember.
Yeah.
You know, those fans are great up in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And so they kind of also grew up a little bit during the playoffs, and the experienced guys, obviously Fleury, James Neal, England, the guys who've been there, played in those playoff games, I thought they were a real calming influence in the locker room. And even though this team didn't have a captain, they had plenty of really good, solid leadership in the room. And I thought that was so critical. And I talk about that in the book as well.
How many chapters are there in the book?
I believe there's 20, along with a prologue and an epilogue, so it's basically 22. It's 284 pages, and there's a website for the book. It's called VegasBornBook.com. Very simple to remember. VegasBornBook.com. You go to the site, you could check out a chapter, you could read some of the endorsements I've got from several noted hockey people, Elliot Freeman from Hockey Night in Canada, Kenny Albert from NBC Sports, Mike Russo from The Athletic, Helene Elliott, the Hall of Fame writer from the LA Times, all have endorsed this book. And most importantly, you could buy it right there online. You could go to several links. If you're an Amazon person, you can go right to Amazon.com, click it on, it'll pop right up. You can order it right there. If you're a Barnes & Noble person, you can click on the Barnes & Noble tab, and it'll go right to the page, and you can buy it there. And our publisher, BookLocker.com, also has it on their site. If you want to go there, you can buy it. You'll order it, they'll print it, they'll ship it to you in a day or two, and you'll have it in a couple of days. We also will have the book, by the way, in both team stores at T-Mobile Arena and at City National Arena. However, I must warn your viewers, there's a very limited amount of books at both sites, so it's going to sell out very quickly. So follow me on Twitter, Steve Carp 56, or go to the website, VegasBornBook.com, and you'll be able to get the updates of when the book is in the store and if it's still available. And hopefully it'll sell out quick, believe me, and hopefully they'll reorder it. Yes, I will hopefully do a book signing in November.
Okay.
I'm trying to get it at City National on a day when the Knights have a morning skate, and you know all the kids are there and all the families and everything. And yes, it's a G-rated book. There's no profanity. I think I have one sentence where Gallant was upset after the Ranger game in New York when they lost, and he used the P word. but that was about the extent of it. But it's a book. I like to say that an 11-year-old could read, and his 81-year-old grandmother could read.
Oh, nice. How does it end?
Well,
Or do you got to read it?
It ends basically with, the draft in Dallas.
Okay.
The guys they took. I was able to get some of the signings, of Reeves and Stastny. I wasn't able to get Pacioretty, but Fleury's re-signing, and I think I got Carlson's re-signing in the book because we had to get it to the publisher.
Yeah.
One thing about this was a very different process than the one I went through with my UNLV basketball book 13 years ago. The RJ at the time had a publishing arm, Stevens Press,
Yeah.
and so everything was done in-house with the UNLV basketball book. This book, I had to go outside and communicate with these people in Florida, and so it was very different. A few potholes in the road, but we made it across the finish line, and I'm very proud of it. And I think your viewers will really enjoy it, and I think all the Golden Knights fans will hopefully get it. And if you see me, and you have the book, I'll be glad to sign it. And like I said, we're hopefully going to have a book signing in November.
Yeah. Was it hard to come up with, say, the last sentence of a book? Because it's almost like, hey, this is
Well,
it. What do I say?
I actually had a great line, but Herb Jaffe, the former sports writer from the Newark Star Ledger, who's a neighbor and friend of mine up in Summerlin, edited the book. And I think the line I was going to say was, training camp was only 90 days away. And he said, Steve, you can't say that because the book's going to be out after training camp. So I think the last line of the book is that it was a season that nobody will ever forget. And it was a good way to end it. And he did a wonderful job editing it, by the way. And so I want to send a little shout out to Herb, who's 85 years old. And I think he turns 86 on Friday. He and I share a birthday. I'm not quite at 86. I'll have to settle for 62 on Friday. But yeah, he did a great job with it. And but it's such an interesting process. It really is.
Oh yeah. What was the last line again? The last line of the book is.
It was a season that nobody will ever forget.
That's good.
And it's true.
Yeah.
Who will ever forget the joy and pleasure this team brought to this community? And we're a year after 1 October, and just how important it was to see these guys assimilate themselves in the community and just help make people feel good, at least for a couple hours, get their minds off it. I thought that was such a big part of it.
Yeah.
Because as you remember, we were all reeling from it. We were, of course, doing our jobs, you and I and all the other reporters in town, trying to cover the story from various angles. Right. And this hockey team, nobody really knew these guys, and the guys didn't know the city other than England, who had lived here. But just the way it all came together, there's just a special thing. And no matter what happens, throughout this team's history, whether they win 3 Stanley Cups or none, or nobody's ever going to forget this first team for that, Chris, because people will, when the little kids who we see at the practice, are grown up and have their own kids, they'll tell their kids that story about when they were little and how that bad man shot all those people that night at that concert, and how this hockey team helped rally the city and get everybody, feeling good again about themselves and help the city heal.
Yeah, they definitely did that. Yeah.
So.